Good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome Reverend Dr. Patrick Pullicino this morning as the witness who will be giving his testimony before the CDAC panel. Thank you for making the time to be with us, Father Patrick. I'm Robert Harris, and I will be chairing today's meeting. I would like to introduce my fellow commissioners, Nina Power, James Bogle, and Will Jones. The purpose of these hearings is to gather evidence from those who say, on account of their Christian faith, that they have faced discrimination, injustice, or hostility. And this commission is ultimately tasked with investigating the nature, context, and scale of any discrimination faced by Christians in the UK on account of their faith. And when the evidence is collected and analysed at the end of the commission's work, a final report will be produced for the attention of Parliament. So with that said, I'd like to ask you, Father Patrick, if you would begin today by telling us what happened to you, if you can just give us a summary of what happened. Thank you very much.
Yes, certainly, Robert. Just to give you a brief background, I was a doctor, and I am a doctor and a neurologist, being in the NHS and also a neurologist in the United States, and was chairman and professor of a department there in New Jersey. Returning to England in 2005 and worked in the NHS from 2005 to 2016 in Canterbury as a consultant in neurology and professor at the University of Kent. Now, I retired from the NHS in 2016 and went into seminary and was ordained in 2019. Now, this episode happened just as I was completing my training before ordination in 2019. And as part of my last year, I was attached to Springfield Hospital in Tooting Bec. Springfield Hospital is a psychiatric hospital. And initially I was going there when asked to go, because they used to call for, we were the parish closest by, and they used to call for priests to go when Catholic patients asked. And then they wanted a more regular presence, so I applied to be a part-time chaplain, and I was accepted as a part-time chaplain on the bank, as they call it, in April 2019. So I started there as bank chaplain, and I was regularly working there, visiting patients on the wards a couple of afternoons a week. And this particular episode happened on the 21st of August. And I was informed that a Catholic patient who was in a certain ward wanted to have a visit from a Catholic chaplain. So I went down there and met the patient who I hadn't seen before, and he wanted to go out and have a chat with me. So I went out with him from the ward, and it was a closed ward. He wouldn't have been allowed out normally. And I went with a witness, a nurse came along, or a worker came along. And he asked me, he asked me if he wanted to introduce his partner to me, his male partner. And he said he wanted to marry his male partner because nowadays it was legal to do so. And he asked my view about this. And I said to him, well, it may be legal, but it does not mean that God would agree with it. So I wanted to put it to him in that way, for him to start to look at himself from the point of view of his religion. And I also asked him about his family, and He said that his father had cut off from him, and he was at odds because he was upset by his way of life. So I told him I have children. I had children, and if I was in the same situation, I would probably be upset too. And we talked for a little longer. He didn't seem too upset, but after about 20 minutes, he said, "I think you'd better go now." And so I said goodbye and hoped I'd see him again. Then, shortly after this, and it was only a few days later, I was told that I should not go to that ward. This was by the head of chaplaincy. There were about 4 chaplains there. I would not go to that ward because one of the patients had made a complaint against me, and I wasn't told what the complaint was. I was told by a fellow chaplain that it was the patient that I'd seen that had made that complaint. So, but I was never given a copy of any formal complaint. Then I was sent, so everything was quiet for 2 or 3 weeks, and I was just banned from visiting that ward. And then the head of chaplaincy wanted to meet with me, and she told me basically that there was an incident against me, and there was a complaint against me, and that as a result of this, a formal complaint had been started against me, and they wanted me to repeat my equality and diversity training. And so I sent an email. I guessed what, who it was and what the sort of complaint might be, because the hospital was very proud of its equality and diversity rating from Stonewall. In fact, they had this on their website that, they always put their grade. I think they was at a 2 level or something. So they were very proud of that. And I sent an email back to the head of chaplaincy, and I said, I would like to have the complaint exactly as it was, to know what it was. And also that why was I being asked to repeat my equality and diversity, since I just joined and I'd just done the full training a couple of months previously. And she replied to say that she just wanted to be sure I understood the equality and diversity training. And again, not saying exactly why or what the exact complaint was, but that was a requirement of me that I should do that. So basically, things remained quiet for another 3 weeks. I did send a letter in and say, it's 26th of September. I sent a letter, and this was after I'd met with the what are their names, the union rep. And basically, I point out to them that trust complaint procedures made 2 provisions with regards to complaints about staff. One, that the complaint had to be passed on, including to the person complained against, and the final response of the complaint procedure should be, the proceedings should be sent to me. So 3 weeks later, I was asked to meet with the social work head who covers the chaplaincy too. And I was informed about the outcome of the investigation. And I was given a copy of a letter from the chief executive to the patient, and again told I had to do my equality and diversity training. And in this letter, which I think I've sent you copies of, one of the main things, there were several things in it that were problematic, because a lot of it was just, I don't know, it's sort of taken off the top of somebody's head. Now, I don't know whether the patient himself had elaborated or whether it was coming from the hospital. But anyway, they said this letter was addressed to the patient, and he'd said that he was visited by a Catholic priest, and I had told him that he should not be with his husband, and that he would go to hell, basically, which I hadn't told him at all. And then she concluded in the letter that yes, she said also that I had told him that I did not think that God would agree to him marrying his partner, which, you know, I hadn't said. I had just elicited this from him, and that was extrapolation from him. And I was also told that I am aware that he also told you that he would be upset if he had children and one of them was gay. Again, I did not mention gay, and that came in. She said that what I had said was not appropriate, and she wanted I would be met and I would be discussed with to ensure that I understand that trust policy on equality and diversity takes precedence over religious beliefs. And this was written in black and white. And I will be asked to reflect on the incident and the impact it had on the patient. And I will be continued to have regular one-on-one meetings with the senior staff to monitor the situation. So at this point, I spoke to Christian Concern, and they produced a reply to the chief executive, and it was sent as if I can find it now, as a grievance pre-action letter. And I think I sent that to you, basically going through all the points I mentioned, and saying that we were moving towards action. So how long have I taken? Probably about 10 minutes, more than 10 minutes. But so basically, at that point, another point was that I had not been shown, I never was actually shown a formal complaint by the patient. When I kept on insisting on this, and this is well after this meeting, a little piece of paper was given to me on which had been scribbled by pencil, he says I'm going to hell, or something like that. And I wasn't allowed to copy it. It was just shown and it was taken away. And that's all I ever saw. So I think that's pretty well the situation as it was. So then we started the procedure, and there was initially, you know, I was asking, but I wanted to, there's one other point I should mention, that then 2 months later, this is September, I suddenly got an email in December saying that I should hand in my badge, and that my position at Springfield had been terminated as from then, basically, that I should not come back again. And I had no inkling before that this was going to happen. They didn't say it was related to all that was going on, but it had to be, because it was clearly, you know, I'd only been there for a few months, and that was the only problem they appeared to have with me. I'd had no problem with them in any other area. Nobody had complained. They knew I was a Catholic priest, and so basically I was fired from that position. So the Christian Concern started this case asking that I should be reinstated, and that what I did ask for, that they state publicly for all staff in the trust that there are 9 protected characteristics and none of them takes precedence over any other. And also to state that the chief executive fully supported the work of her chaplains, who are free to discuss their religious values with their patients. And that she realized that, you know, religious values were just as protected as sexual orientation. And she also had a duty to her employees under Section 4A of the NHS Constitution. And saying that, you know, telling that due procedure was not met by the fact that they had not given me a copy of the complaint, and that they actually sent a letter before to the patient without me having a chance to look at it. So initially this was going to court, and Christian Concern advised me eventually that we should try and settle before it went to court, because it was unlikely to achieve. First of all, they said I would be very unlikely to achieve to get my position back, whatever. So they advised me that they should discuss an out-of-court settlement, and they offered to pay £10,000. Of course, it wasn't money I was after, but they said that it was the best thing to do to take it, because it showed that they admitted fault. And in fact, I got that money, but I gave it to charity. So that's pretty well the story. I think I may have missed out a few things, but if there are questions, you're welcome to ask.
Thank you very much, Father Patrick, for that summary. That's very helpful. I would like to begin the questions, if I may, and they really start with some background questions. So you were assigned on a part-time basis to Springfield Hospital, University Hospital,
Yes.
and it's part of what is called the Southwest London and St George's Mental Health NHS Trust. Now, I'm informed by the information you sent us that you worked, correct me if I'm wrong here, you worked 2 afternoons a week. Now, it's all too easy to assume that people know what a hospital chaplain does, and I have my ideas about what that role entails, but putting assumptions aside, can you tell us first, describe what the role of a Catholic chaplain in a hospital does, and also what it is, and also how you developed that role with the establishment of a Bible study? Can you just give voice to what that role entailed for you, please?
Yes. Well, a chaplain at a psychiatric hospital actually is different from a chaplain at a general hospital, which I had done too, the hospital. But obviously in a psychiatric hospital, it's more, you have to be much more careful with assessing patients' mental state when you talk to them, and being careful about that. So Springfield has a very large campus with, I don't know how many wards there are, about at least 15, with different specialty areas like psychosis and eating disorders. So what you would do is to try and I mean, I was a Catholic chaplain, but chaplaincy in the NHS now, they do not assign to different religions, but you are a chaplain and expected to do everything. So there was a Muslim chaplain who sort of handed out Qurans, and there was me as a single Catholic, but there were two Anglican chaplains, and so they basically divided the work. But if a Muslim asked for, to see a chaplain, the Muslim would be sent, and if a Catholic asked, the Catholic would be sent. And in particular, Catholic chaplain would be asked to do confession, and also I set up a weekly communion service on one of the wards. And also, if asked to give the Eucharist to somebody, I would set that up and go and give them the Eucharist. So there was confession, there was Eucharist, there was then the visits. You basically go to the different wards and say, does anybody want to see a chaplain? Or particularly the Catholic, I'm the Catholic chaplain, so you would make yourself known. And you would sit down, talk to them, and see if you could help them. Some people regularly, because they were in there for a long time. Some of these people would be there for months, some of them, even years. And I did set up a Bible study group in one of the wards, and I had 3 people coming regularly to that group. And yes, I think they liked that. So that's pretty well what I would do.
And how many patients were there in this hospital?
In Springfield, I think they're about, overall, if I'm not mistaken now, they're around about a couple of hundred patients, which is, for a psychiatric hospital, is very big. And they had specialty areas, like in eating disorders. They had a psychosis unit, and they had a long stay schizophrenia unit. And it's a very, clinically, it's a very nice hospital to work in, because all the units are nicely, it's a modern type hospital. But it's still got a lot of grounds around it. Now that a lot of hospitals are taking away those grounds. But yes, it's a nice hospital to work with.
And did non-Catholic patients, be they Christian or of other beliefs or no beliefs, ever want your pastoral support in any way?
Oh yes, I mean, when you went on the ward, you didn't say, well, I have to speak to Catholics. In fact, I used to speak to Muslim patients, and I used to speak to anybody that, you didn't ask for their religion straight out or make judgments about it. You would go, does anybody want to speak to the chaplain? And I'm the Catholic chaplain, and some people would say, yes, I would like to speak to. So you just sit down and speak to them. Most of the meetings were not set up from beforehand. You'd go on, and there'd be people who want to have a discussion with you about a particular problem. Sometimes it was because they felt that they'd been put on the ward against their will, and they did not deserve to be there, and they wanted help to get off because they were very frustrated about that. Or it was personal reasons that they had lost touch. They wanted to speak to their relatives. And yes, I mean, people in very vulnerable situations, they're vulnerable because of their condition. They get very disorientated, particularly those who have a psychosis or resolving psychosis. It's a very, very stressful thing to go through, and they're on medication. So, and I hadn't worked in a unit like that before, but from family members, I knew something about psychosis, and I I warmed to the work, and because you could see how needy these people are. You know, they're cut off. A lot of them are in wards together, but they don't necessarily have anything in common with each other. I mean, it's like, and often you get different psychiatric conditions in the same ward. So, and there's a very, very wide, you know, there's depression and psychosis, and then there's behavior problems. So you might find all those people in the same wards.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask about the conversation that you had with this gentleman on the 20th of August 2019. Now, it was he who asked to see you, specifically a
Yes.
Catholic priest.
Mm.
And when you met him, he requested that you go for a walk outside. And at that time, there was a female individual present throughout that
Yes.
conversation. Was that woman, what was her role exactly at the hospital? Do you remember?
He was one of the support staff on the ward. The psychiatric nurses, or I wasn't sure exactly what her role was, but basically she was one of the support staff. So, you know, in a situation like that, she was one of the persons who would come out and act as a witness, basically.
Because you said earlier that it was a closed ward. So am I right in understanding that there would be a protocol for vulnerable patients who would not have the freedom that would be, enjoyed by patients in other hospitals, and therefore there would have to be someone with them at all times if they wanted to go into the garden, for example. Is
Definitely,
that the
yes.
understanding? Right.
Yes. I mean,
Yes.
some people from those wards are, when they reach a certain level in their cure, they're allowed out for a certain time and with certain restrictions to come back again. But
Right.
yes, as part of the protocol, if we went out, there had to be somebody with us.
Right. Now, there was a dispute, a difference of understanding of what was said at that meeting. Obviously, you've given your version of events, and this man claimed other things were said. Was this woman ever consulted by was there an opportunity for this woman ever to be consulted by your solicitor at the time to ask for her recollection of what was actually spoken between you and this
No, there was never
gentleman?
an opportunity, and I did state that what had been told to me was wrong, and they never got back and said, well, you know, we could look and see what you know, to cross-examine her, or she never wrote a statement, which she should have been asked to write. In fact, I never saw her again. In fact, I never saw the patient again
No.
because I was barred from going to that ward for a couple of months. Why, I don't know, because I'd heard he'd been moved. Um, yes, no, there was never a chance to cross-examine her about that.
Now, in one of the documents you sent us, you've referred to some notes that you made around the time this was going on, or I should say shortly after the event. I think it was reference to your solicitor. And did the word homosexuality or any corresponding word come up in the conversation with this gentleman? I mean,
No,
same-sex marriage came up, didn't it?
no. Yes, same-sex marriage. He said he wanted to marry his partner, his male partner. But
And
homosexuality did not come up, gay did not come up, and I didn't mention those words.
right. And just for the record, I think your response was a question. What would God think about that? Was that the
Yes, I said, what would God think about that? Because, you know, I didn't want to implant my views on him. I wanted to elicit what he should be doing for himself and questioning what he was doing and his motives. And it seems like he he did that, and he came up with this complaint. Although I must say, looking back on this, I just wonder whether this whole thing had been set up because, you know, I had only been a chaplain there for 4 months. I had not sort of established any notoriety or anything. I was sort of working quietly 2 afternoons a week. I wore a little Sacred Heart badge, so they would have known I was a Catholic chaplain. But it, the, um, 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 It's like, why would a Catholic who knew what a Catholic priest would say ask, uh, unless they wanted to, they were thinking of, changing their situation. And then why would they be offended at me saying what I said? So it almost seemed like that it was a foregone conclusion that I had to, I was asked to see him, and then shortly after this process started, and I found myself without a position. And there wasn't a huge confrontation with this man. There was no confrontation at all. The only thing I felt was at a certain point, he said, well, I think you'd better go now. So I noticed that change. But that's right. So this whole thing happened. And it's almost like it was predetermined that they wanted to get rid of me because of my belief.
Yes. Now, I want to talk about the diversity training. I have a few questions about that. In the documentation you sent us, you made it clear that you agreed to do it, but it was done out of goodwill. You didn't really believe there was a necessity for it, and that you saw it as a sanction. Is that correct? Would you like to add
Yes,
anything to that?
yes,
Yes.
that's right. Well, I'd done it as part of my training before I was onboarded, and then they wanted me to do this again in a few months later. So I said, well, what is the reason for this? And clearly they never told me that I was biased against gays or against homosexuality, but the inference was obviously there because, I had to do this diversity training again. And I said, all right, I would do it, not because I felt I needed to do it, but I wanted to get back to work in the chaplaincy, and I thought, well, if this would do it, then I'll get back to seeing patients. But in fact, the opposite happened. I was kicked out.
Can you tell us exactly what featured in the diversity training?
Well, it's difficult to remember the whole thing, but it's just a standard equality and diversity training of the NHS, where they go through you show you different individuals and different types of diversity, covering because there's sort of 9 areas covering them, and showing you how how you should respond to that, and how they expected the NHS would respond. um I can't remember what it had about religion in particular. It's something I did a long time ago. But basically, it's one of the standard. I wouldn't say it was very biased. I would have remembered if it was very biased towards homosexuality, but I think it was just standard thing.
So am I right in
Sorry, I've got a
understanding
fly buzzing around here. That's why I keep batting the air.
so am I right in understanding that all the 9 protected characteristics would typically be covered in the diversity training?
Yes, typically they would be, and I'm pretty sure that some more strongly than others. But as I say, I couldn't remember exactly. And I certainly, religion was not put in there prominently, you know. And in fact, if I remember anything, it was just a very token thing for religion. But it certainly wasn't, given emphasis, which it should be. In fact, that hospital there used to be a very religious hospital. There are actually two. There's a huge chapel. It's much more would be called a church, and there's also a smaller chapel. And I asked about it, and they said that all the patients used to go to church in those chapels every day. They'd be going in every day. I mean, this is a long time ago, but there was this was deep religious kind of uh, past that this hospital had. And we went to the main to the main chapel, which is beautiful, got stained glass windows, but very sadly it's been turned over to become a children's gym. And in fact, I went with the head of chaplaincy, and I said, well, couldn't we just have the front? We suggested we could have the front, the sanctuary of the chapel closed off for us with the beautiful stained glass, and use it as a little chapel. And they were totally against that. In fact, what happened in the end, I think that the whole place was sold to a developer to make into flats of some kind.
Yes.
So the religion had been really taken out from there. And, you know, what I heard from other people was basically they were very intolerant of religion. And, you know, chaplaincy was being squeezed. In fact, we were in a reasonable area. We had desks, and but they had decided to take away all the offices and just give chaplains hot desks, which means just a shelf outside the wards with a computer. So you just have to go to the computer, fill in your thing, and move on, basically. So you wouldn't have. And, you know, I think they really do not, particularly psychiatric patients, need they need to go back to their religious roots, because one of the things that gets disrupted with psychiatric illness is the connection with God. And it can be very, very therapeutic to get them back to a spiritual understanding, and because their world is all sort of disturbed. And if you start to bring back these truths and talk to them, pray with them, it really does help them to get better. But of course, you know, they totally against this.
Right. Can I just go back a few steps regarding the equality and diversity training? In an email from September 2019 to the head chaplain at the hospital, you refer to the fact that you were aware of the contents of the equality and diversity training, and that you said that you had done that training repeatedly over 14 years. That's your own words, repeatedly over 14 years. During that 14-year period, was that for the NHS in your
Now
role?
it's for the NHS, yes.
Yes. And had you noticed over that period of time any changes to the equality and diversity training? And if so, what were those changes exactly?
That's a difficult thing to say. Clearly, there has been changes, and the whole the equality and diversity law didn't come in. I think it was 2010, wasn't it?
The Equality Act 2010.
Yes.
Yes.
So after that, there was a lot of changes, and the whole system changed a lot. Where with the diversity and all the different protected characteristics, because I think that's when they came in. So it did definitely change at that point. Before that, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on the diversity training as such. I think it would have been more like a social, you know, respect for other people within the NHS. And it's sort of more crystallized into these diversity categories from after the law came in.
Right. Okay. I just have a few more questions for now. You referred to a bank chaplain. What does that mean exactly? What's that terminology?
Chaplains and bank, it's not only just chaplains, but the bank staff are sort of temporary staff, part-time. You basically, and when I was told, you know, I was told I had to leave. I said, well, you know, can I protest against this? Can I you know, bring up a challenge? And they said, no, bank staff have no rights, basically. You're there temporary, and you can be discharged whenever they want. You don't get paid leave. You don't get any sort of extras. You just get paid by the hour for the time that you put in.
Right. My final question for the time being is really about the role of a chaplain in one of the documents, you reference this idea of a generic chaplain, and I think you indirectly refer to it in your overview at the beginning. What's your knowledge at the moment about the role of a chaplain, a Christian chaplain specifically, be they Catholic or Anglican, within England and Wales? How is that undergoing a change? I think you have some thoughts about that. Could you share with
Yes,
us?
I mean, this is very important, really, because they have a lot of hospitals are forcing chaplaincy into a generic spirituality. In fact, they call them now spirituality centers. And this is really an attack against Christians, because the Muslim side of the equation is actually being pushed up. And in that hospital there were about percentage of patients who were Muslim, and I asked these, I didn't actually have the official figures, but they're around about 5%, maybe small percentage. Yet out of the 4 chaplains, there was 1 full-time Muslim, and they were actively trying to get a second, well, the Muslim person wanted a second part-time chaplain. They'd actually set up a special area for ablutions, Muslim area for Muslim chaplains to wash. I mean, it's like there seemed to be a lot of support for the Muslim side, whereas if they were generic, none of these things should have been put in specially for them. So it was a two-way thing. They say, oh, we're all generic, we all have to do everything. So theoretically, the Catholic chaplain, if somebody wanted a Quran, theoretically you would have to take it. Of course, I didn't do that, and I wouldn't. But the other side of the issue is that people, when they are sick, particularly psychiatrically, they need their own pastor. A generic pastor is useless. The spiritual, they think of spirituality. I think if people don't understand God and they have no faith, they think that spirituality in general is sort of, all nebulous. But that's obviously it's not the case. People need their own, they want to go back, they have their church, they want a connection with it. And that's what was needed. And I tried to start up as well then, some way, because I had patients occasionally that came from our church. And I said, okay, well, what do you do when these patients are discharged? When they're discharged, they feel very vulnerable. So you immediately need somebody from the church to start visiting them at home when they're in that vulnerable situation, because they don't have enough confidence to go to the church and meet people. So that was what I had tried to start setting up with the Catholics. But I think all religions, they need that. They need the intermediate person as when they leave the hospital to support them back into their normal, because churches are, for these for elderly people in particular, as you know, they are their social centers. So if these people leave hospital, get stuck at home, and they never have, the move back, they can be very isolated.
Then I just focus on the example you gave. You said that as a Catholic chaplain, if a Muslim patient wanted a Quran, you would have to be ready and provide the copy of the Quran that's in the hospital. Is that right?
Theoretically, everybody should do all the jobs. And in fact, the Muslim chaplain made a point of taking rosary. If rosaries need taking, they would take it. But I don't know, that probably wouldn't be a bother to them, but to me, it would certainly be a bother. It would be wrong to go and take a Quran to somebody.
But was this, I don't suppose this was an explicit requirement. It was an implicit thing that you would be expected to do.
Exactly.
Is that the understanding?
It was implicit. So I think between the chaplains, I mean, if the hospital wanted to enforce it, they potentially could, but between the chaplains, the Anglican chaplain, who I knew very well, should say, oh, there's a Catholic in such and such a ward. Please, would you go over and see them? Initially, they might make the contact, but then they'd pass it over to me.
But at that time, there was yourself, Catholic chaplain, there was a full-time Muslim chaplain. Who were the other two? What was their identity?
The head of chaplaincy was a Lutheran, and then there were two Anglicans, one full-time and one part-time. And then there was a Muslim, and there was myself part-time. He was part-time too, actually, the Muslim.
Yes. Okay.
But he spent more time there than I did.
Okay. I'm going to park my further questions for now because there will be a lot of questions that the other commissioners have. So I'm going to follow the names that are in the order on my screen. So Nina, can I ask you to take over and put forward your questions to Father Patrick, please?
Yes,
thank you very
certainly. Good morning, Father Patrick.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to push a little bit on some of the speculative aspects because I think Robert has pushed you on all of the practical questions I was going to ask about the support staff member who accompanied you and why there was no testimony from this person and whether you were able to access her account. You've answered that question. That seems to be a really obvious gap in both the hospital's behavior. Let's put it that way. At one point you said, and this is very speculative, so please interrupt me if the way I'm framing it is incorrect, and I hope I don't overstep anything.
Sure.
You wondered whether there was a degree, an element of a kind of setup
Yes.
in what happened, and I'm just wondering if you could clarify whether you thought that was perhaps coming from the patient insofar as what he reported is clearly completely at odds with what you said. Clearly then the hospital or certain people in the trust then ran without conferring with you or without any due process, ran with what he alleged you said to him. The only evidence for which you saw was this scribbled piece of paper, which didn't in fact say all of the things that he then alleged you said or previously
Right.
alleged you said. Do you, in relation to this very speculative direction, do you think that this was some scheme or idea of the patient that was then perhaps opportunistically taken up by certain members of the trust? Or do you think there was more to it? I just wondered if you could speak a little bit more on this.
Yes.
I know this is
The patient seemed a very, he was in because of a psychosis and he was recovering, and he may not have recovered fully. I don't think he was quite back to normal, but I didn't see any, maliciousness or any sort of, and he was in a situation where I don't think he would have been somebody making plans like this. He just wasn't well enough to be doing that sort of thing. So I really think there's somebody else, and most likely, from my point of view, it was the Stonewall lobby. I think within the trust. I mean, I've got no proof for that, but basically, as you say, what he said was totally exaggerated, and it was just like made up. I shouldn't be with the husband. He was going to hell. It was like you could. It was a sort of very hackneyed type of response that they would expect from a Catholic priest. And since I didn't say it, they put it in anyway. So I suspected, because they had such a strong Stonewall lobby, and because I think because they really, thought that a Catholic priest was a danger to for some reason, that this was set up. I don't think that man would have made all those things by himself.
But just to be clear, you're not implying that somebody spoke to the patient before he then spoke to you. This is the order of it's that he, for whatever set of reasons we don't know, requested to speak to you. Then he misreported what was said, and then this was taken up by members of the trust, perhaps influenced by Stonewall.
There had to be somebody who started the whole thing going, because you know, even the reason for him coming was slightly spurious, because he already knew what, as I said, what a Catholic priest would say. And if he'd had a problem like that, he wouldn't have said, you know, he would more have said, you know, I'm worried about my situation, and can you advise me on that? Not say, you know, I've got a partner, we want to get married, will you meet him? It's like, I think if he had a genuine religious concern about homosexuality, he would have said that, you know. I think I suspect that he was pushed to do this, and then it was elaborated as it went along.
Okay, did you at any point ask to asked to access any information about Stonewall's relation to the trust, or any communication? I mean, they could have said no, but the extent to which Stonewall was linked up with the trust, did you ask to sort of find out more about that, or was it you just knew that there was some?
No, I knew pretty well, because I mean, you look at the website, you see it's all
Yeah.
sort of emblazoned there, and I would have thought that I wasn't going to. It wasn't up to me to go investigating them. I was just, just wanting to hang on to my position, basically. And what I did ask is whether that nurse could have been interviewed.
Yes.
To get her side of the view, and nothing came back from that.
Okay. Yeah, that's it from me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Will Jones, would you like to put your questions forward?
Hi, thanks, Robert. Hi, Father Patrick.
Hello.
I noticed in the documents that the lead chaplain, when you met with her in September, I believe, seemed relatively supportive and helpful, but then her communication in February seemed very short and didn't give an indication of being supportive anymore.
Yes.
This was the period between which the original situation and investigation happened, and then when you received the letter essentially dismissing you. Do you have any inclination or any indication what happened in those intervening weeks, months, to cause that change from
No, I don't know.
what
She was actually a new chaplain, and she didn't start. She wasn't there when I first started in August. She was appointed. She should have been appointed very shortly before this happened. So I think she was feeling her way along, probably getting to know what was what. She was supportive, but she was obviously being told what to say by the head, or probably by the head social worker, because she clearly said, I have to do the diversity training, and that was just not negotiable. And so she had clear views about that, and I really don't think that came from her. I think she just found this situation and was being told what to do. And I think that same thing in February, she was told, that's it, and she had to do it, and she did it. I'm not saying she wasn't supportive, but I don't think she ever saw my point of view. And I mentioned that I wasn't being treated fairly, and there was no effort to try and shift things in my direction in terms of being fair.
Okay, thank you. And so what do you think happened behind the scenes? Do you think there was just movement behind the scenes? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
So I'm not sure what happened and where this whole thing started, and it seemed to the complaint. You see, there wasn't a formal complaint that I could see. They never gave me a written complaint from the patient as such. So where did the complaint start? Who actually made that complaint? Where did it? How did it get up to the chief executive that quickly? How did it become a formal complaint? All of these things I've got no idea about. And the trust complaints procedure clearly says that that has to be sent to the person complaint against. The formal complaint has to be sent, and a copy of the response. So, you know, it was all done completely against procedure.
Thank you. Did the Catholic Church support you in any way throughout this, either privately or publicly?
No, they did not. And I went to my parish priest and I said, you know, I'm having this problem with the hospital, and you know, I'm having to go up to a meeting, etc. And it was really no support at all. He said, oh, you know, sort of brushed it off. And I didn't take it any higher than the parish priest, because if he wasn't going to support me, then I thought that there wouldn't be any support higher up. But basically, I thought that was very bad. You know, they should have been supportive. The Christian Concern were excellent, though. In fact, I went to them and asked, and they immediately wanted support. I showed them the letter, and they said, "Look, this is egregious. We have to follow up on this." And so, thank goodness that they were there. You know, they were there for me. And I think the Catholics really need to sort of start doing something in this direction. They need to support the chaplains. Chaplains are having a really tough time, particularly Christian chaplains. I mean, on the other side, Muslim chaplains seem to be mushrooming everywhere, but and moving into Christian space. Chapels, churches being all closed down. I don't know if there are any left in hospitals now that they use. A few there are, but and some of them are beautiful old chapels. But it's been a devastation, and I don't know why the NHS is so against chaplaincy. Chaplaincy is so badly needed for patients, and you know, it's a very bad situation, as I'm sure you know. And if you look at the numbers of chaplains, they've gone down and down, and it's not surprising.
Thank you. When, if at all, is your bishop aware, or your diocese aware of what's happened to you, and at what point did they become aware?
Yes, I sent him these letters, and I think I did have a meeting with him, and he saw them. And actually, at that point, he said, "Well, you know," he said, "I support you very much on this, and if there's anything I can do, let me know." And at that time, I was already speaking to Christian Concern.
When
But
was
there
that?
was, sorry.
At what point was that?
That was after, I think that was after I'd been kicked out, basically, and I had those letters, and the Christian Concern were helping me towards challenging it. I think that was the point. And in fact, there is a bishop in the Catholic Church who's in charge of chaplains. And I did try to approach him, but frankly, I just, you know, didn't get anywhere.
Did you take the bishop who said who offered to help? Did you take him up on any of that? Did he make any kind of statement?
Well, you know, I was getting on so well with Christian Concern helping that I thought, and I knew they don't have the, I mean, if he wanted to help, he could have been in touch with the hospital. What I'd hoped maybe was that he would at least send a letter in the direction of the chief executive to show support. But you know, that wasn't forthcoming. But it was, you know, I could hardly tell him, "Please, would you write a letter to her saying this, this, and this?" But you know, that was the obvious thing I wanted when I went to meet with him. Some, you know, some support in those terms. But I think what he said, he said he very much supports me, but handed me on to the bishop who was in charge of chaplaincy. He was difficult to get hold of anyway, but I'm not sure if he ever, you know, I ever got a reply to my my email.
Did Christian Concern attempt to engage with the bishops?
I don't know. I don't think they did. I think Christian Concern were very focused on the issue, and basically it was they're not, and they are not. They're not. Christian Concern are not like, they don't have a religious hierarchy. They're administrative and legal, so they would not want to be telling the bishop what to do, basically. If you see what I mean.
Okay, and there was no indication that they might think it would be helpful to get something from your hierarchy.
They didn't say that, and Christian Concern is happy to help any Christian denomination, and I don't know what experience they've had in the past. I think if they had a regular link to the Catholics, if there was a sort of a regular pathway, then maybe they would have said, oh yes, well, let's get on to such and such, because any Catholics that come through, we always do this. There wasn't that, and I know other Catholics have been helped. So I think they very much worked on their own, and they were happy to do that. And I think it would just have added a political element, which might have just made it more difficult.
You asked the trust to clearly state that the Equality Act protected all protected characteristics, including religion, equally. Did the trust ever release any kind of statement like that, do anything along those lines?
No, they didn't. In fact, I was very disappointed in the end. The £10,000 was a token, but it was nothing. It was nothing of what I wanted. I thought that for other chaplains, there had to be this statement, but Christian Concern lawyers said there was no way they could force them to do this, because it was at a tribunal. They said, well, we'd have to go to a court to do this, and it's very unlikely that the court would force them either to take me back on or to make a public statement like that. They said it just wouldn't happen. So that was one of the reasons we stopped early. But I think just a long time passed. So in the end, I sort of was on to other things rather than going back to chaplaincy. But if they'd given me my position back, I would have gone just to reestablish the place for other chaplains, other Catholic chaplains. In fact, there'd been a Catholic chaplain all the way along. The only chaplain had been Catholic for many years. And there was a whole cupboard of vestments there, Catholic vestments, which hadn't been used for saying Mass. And so obviously there's somebody who'd been very involved, but it's basically, they're not going to have another one then.
Right. I believe it is the acting CEO, Vanessa Ford. Is that
Yes?
right?
Yes.
It was she who wrote to you saying that the NHS diversity and equality policy takes precedence over religious beliefs. Have I got that right? Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that was the egregious point that Christian Concern looked at and said, look, we have to chase this because this is egregious, basically.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, sorry.
And I note that although she refused to apologize for that, she did admit that her phrasing had not been very good or something.
Exactly, yes.
Are you able to recall, don't worry if you can't, are you able to recall off the top of your head what the NHS policy that she's referring to actually said in outline, if not in detail, that she claims takes precedence over?
Oh, that's a total invention, because there's nothing that states that equality and, well, basically what she's saying is equality and diversity takes precedence over religious beliefs. What she's saying is the NHS setup on equality and diversity would trump religious beliefs, but that's a self-contradiction, because religious beliefs is one of the protected characteristics. So she may not have been aware of that, but she should have.
So there isn't anything specific that you can recall in a policy somewhere that specifically states anything along the lines of
No.
that I don't know what it would say, but that the principles of equality and diversity take precedence, that or anything about how religious beliefs, that those of chaplains and the ministry of chaplains has to be subject to and restricted by the policy. Is that, can you recall any kind of statement?
No, there isn't anything like that. And that's the reason why I won this case in the end, because they realized it was totally wrong. I mean, if there had been that, I don't think I would have won that case, because they would have said, look, it says so in policy, this, that, and the other, and this is what she meant. But there was no support for what she said at all. So I think this is in her own mind. And they were so taken by the importance of keeping up with Stonewall's requirements, that I think they'd forgotten about, religious beliefs.
I imagine that if such a statement did appear in an equality and diversity policy, I don't imagine such a statement would appear, but if it did, I imagine it would be challenged and possibly removed under some kind of legal process as being in conflict with the Equality Act, which may be why there wasn't any kind of statement like that. But it's interesting that because that wasn't the statement, but she acted as though that was, and said that was seemed to be her belief about what the policy said, and she acted in accordance with that. But because that wasn't actually what it said, she essentially got away with removing you from the position, and then only having to pay compensation with barely any kind of apology. Well, there wasn't really an apology, was there? So it seems that there doesn't seem to be very much consequence for completely getting the policy wrong and acting contrary to what seems to be the equality law in this respect. Would that be your feeling as well, that the consequences?
Yes, definitely. And in terms of LGBT, it's kind of swept the whole board, and that protected characteristic is kind of swamped everything. So it's and it's very damaging to chaplaincy, because they don't want chaplaincy. They want chaplains out, if anything.
Thank you. That's my questions for now.
Thank you very much, Will. Can I ask James Bogle to take over, if you would put your questions to Father Patrick, please? Can you unmute yourself, James?
Yes, thanks very much, Professor. Were you sent a settlement letter? Was there a letter in which they offered the sum of money that you were eventually paid?
I can't remember that, but I'd have to look up and make sure I wasn't. I can't remember it, James.
Okay. It may have gone to Christian Concern if they were supporting you.
That's right. It probably would have gone. Definitely would have gone to them. That's right. I can't remember that, to tell you the truth.
Can you remember if there was any written or oral apology by the hospital?
The only apology was the one that that Will has just mentioned, that the chief executive said that her phraseology could have been better. But I think that's as far as they ever went.
Right.
The phraseology of her letter could have been better.
And that was it.
That is it, yes.
Even though they had to pay you out a substantial sum of money.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes. There was never any pullback on their views of equality and diversity, and on her statement that was never withdrawn. Yeah.
And was there any retraction of the claims made as to what they claimed you had said to the complainant?
No, there's never any retraction on that either. It was say so really that he said this, but she took it as total truth. And what he said was basically used as the main, thrust of her letter. And she repeated the allegations, and she never ever questioned them. And apart from the fact that this was a man with a psychiatric illness who was still not stable after a recent episode. So, it just really, really didn't make sense how she was putting so much weight on this, this very, very flimsy evidence. And it all pointed to the fact that she was just trying to pay homage to the Stonewall powers that be, basically.
So in essence, she was apparently, to your knowledge, more inclined to believe the evidence of somebody who had recently had a psychiatric episode,
Yes.
to one of the chaplains officially employed by the hospital.
Yes, exactly.
And did you point that out to anybody, any of the hospital authorities at any stage?
Yes, I think in our response letter, yes, we did. In the response letter, we pointed that out. We said that what she'd written was totally wrong, that there was no evidence for it. And
no, I was thinking more in terms of, you prefer to believe someone who's had a psychiatric illness, a recent episode.
yes, I'm not sure.
Chaplain.
Yes, no, I don't think I put in specifically that, because I hadn't tested him formally at that particular point. So it would have been making inferences on my part that he wasn't psychiatrically back to normal. But it's just the fact that it takes time for those sort of things to settle. But
in any case, there was no recognition of that point by the hospital authorities.
No, there's no recognition at all. And, it's quite bizarre in a way, because she seems to have been disconnected from what psychiatric patients actually, the actual turmoil that they go through and the difficulties that there are. And this is not a normal situation when you have a patient who's just recovering, challenging a member of staff. There's no way you can take that at face value. You have to, if you're going to do something like this and you really think something wrong has gone on, you've got to go back. You'd have to get a statement from the doctor saying, he was in perfect mental health and I tested him and he was sound. And you'd have to get a statement from the social worker saying that he'd been behaving well. And in fact, I had that statement where he actually had challenged, in my letter, he challenged, he made a very serious allegation against one of the staff members within the first few seconds that I met him. So he wasn't somebody in a state to be making these allegations.
So he'd made complaints against staff before?
I don't know that, because I never met him before and I never saw him again, but he made a very, you can see from my notes.
Oh, you mean he made a serious complaint against you?
No, he made a serious complaint against a staff member who was standing about 10 feet away and said that man there has assaulted me.
Was that reported to the hospital authorities as far as you know?
I reported it to my more superior chaplain, and I said, look, he's made this complaint. Should I take this further? And then she said to me, well, do you think he really meant this, or do you think that this is part of his condition, so to speak, that he didn't really mean it? It wasn't, I forget what she said, but it wasn't, it was just part of the situational thing. And I said I wasn't 100% sure. So she said, well, I wouldn't report it until you went back and spoke to him and asked him again about it, which I was planning to do, but then I never got to see him again. So basically it was never taken up to anybody higher. But well, I did take it to somebody higher than me, but you know, they had more experience than me, and they said basically, hold it until you have a bit more proof about that.
So the hospital took a false accusation of mere words, i.e. yours,
Yes.
more seriously than it took an allegation of physical assault.
Yes. Well, she was part of the hospital system, the person I spoke to. But that's right. You should that should have been. I mean, I think she was right. She was right in her assessment, probably, because I wasn't 100% sure whether this man wasn't making this up on the spur of the moment.
Yes, but is that a matter for you or her to decide? Surely that's a matter for the hospital authorities. And therefore,
well, that's right.
senior
That's right.
advice.
That's right, because it was it was potentially a serious thing, and maybe I should have just gone over her head and reported it. But in fact,
you've discharged your duty by telling the senior chaplain.
Yes, and they also all had a copy of that note that I gave you, that I made just the day after that I saw him, and that was part of what I sent in. So they should all have seen that.
Yeah. So this incident, that is to say, the complaint against you, seems to be a blatant example of discrimination against a Catholic chaplain, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, very much so.
And for no other reason than that he is a Christian, i.e. you.
Yes, no other reason than I was. Well, that's right, but I think it was. I don't know. They don't seem to have acted this way towards the other chaplains at all. I mean, it was like they targeted me, and I had no reason to be targeted. I mean, there hadn't been any incidents. I was just going about my work quietly, basically twice a week. But I was clearly, I had a badge, Sacred Heart badge, so they clearly saw that I was a Catholic. So I don't know. I think they might have thought that if I stayed around, they would be opening to challenge against their values, and I think they might have said, "Well, get rid of him," before anything like that happened. And
Well,
yeah,
even if that was their reason, that would it not be a blatant example of discrimination against a Catholic chaplain?
Definitely.
Was there any acknowledgement that they had failed to follow proper procedures in dismissing you?
No, and that was never acknowledged either, and the procedures were totally thrown out the window. We never, because I looked up the trust complaint procedure. I went to speak to the what's his name, to the union rep, and basically they were supposed to pass the complaint on to me before making it formal, and also supposed to have shown me a copy of the conclusion, which just didn't happen. They didn't. There was the whole environment there, and other people told me, is a sort of very bullying environment. I think it's quite frequent in the NHS, but it seemed to be particularly prevalent in that hospital.
What is more prevalent?
Well, a kind of bullying environment where they do what they please, and there's no.
Well, that's.
No
I mean,
response.
let's be a bit more specific. Who is the subject of this bullying?
Well, I feel I was subject of bullying because
But anyone other than you?
No, I have no. This is just what I was, told. But basically, I can't. There's no evidence of it.
We don't want to be hearing what you were told, unless it impacts directly on your case. We're more concerned about what you yourself experienced. But have you experienced? I mean, in the sense that other chaplains may have experienced similar things to you, that is relevant if you were told that. Is that what you were going to say?
I wasn't, I can't say that I was told that people had, specific chaplains had been bullied.
Right.
But I did speak to people, but I couldn't remember the, the exact things, what they told me.
Right. Okay. Well, look, have I, can I summarize? And I appreciate summarizing briefly leaves out important detail, but just so that we are clear what the position is. They initially asked you to undertake further diversity training as a result of the complaint. And then without warning, this was turned into a formal complaint. And then without any particulars being given to you, without any opportunity for you to respond, and without any proper interview or hearing, you were dismissed on the basis of allegations that you tell us were not true. Have I summarized what you said at the beginning of your evidence correctly or not?
Yes, there was one meeting. That the head social worker asked me to, and that was on 8th of October. And I was informed that the investigation, I was informed about the outcome of the investigation at that time and given a copy of the letter that the chief executive had already sent out. But it was basically a fait accompli. The letter had been sent, what she'd written had been written, and the letter had been dated 19th of September. So it means that, nearly 3 weeks before the whole thing was decided. So I wasn't really put in a situation where I could dispute it at that point.
And an investigation in which you took no part whatever?
Not at all, no part at all. I didn't even know it was going on initially.
Okay. What do you think made the lead chaplain change from being supportive to being hostile to you?
I think she was just told. I think, I didn't know her well, as I say. And I think she just, from the little interactions I had, she seemed a nice person, but she did exactly what her senior told her without any input. And that's what she did.
Right. And who do you think she was told, or is it within your knowledge as to who told her?
Well, it would have come from the head social worker who's in charge of that group, and that would have come then probably from the chief executive.
Right.
So it would have followed that chain.
Okay. To your knowledge, had she been approached by any other members of the hospital staff besides the social worker and possibly the CEO? Or is that something outside your knowledge?
The head of chaplaincy?
Yeah, the head of chaplaincy.
Had she been approached?
Yeah. Do you think she'd been, to your knowledge, had she been approached by anyone other than the social worker and possibly the CEO?
I don't know. That'd be outside of my knowledge.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't think she knew me well either, because, like I say, she was only just hired a couple of months before this happened. So
right. You mentioned that she might have been approached by the head social worker. To your knowledge, had she been approached by anyone from the hospital human resources department? Do you know?
I don't know. I really don't know, because I didn't have a lot of interaction with her.
Right.
It was just, she called me to this meeting. She had the meeting, and it was a very formal meeting. She says this, and this. So, and it seemed much more at that point in time. It had to be she was just parroting what was given to her, because she was very, very new to the job.
Right. I
So she would
understand.
have been told, you say this, this, and this, and this. So that's what she did.
Okay. Just moving on then, you say you received no assistance from your parish priest, that's your Catholic parish priest.
That's right.
Why do you think that was? Could he have been intimidated by the current climate or by the law or for some other reason?
I don't know, really. I think it's like, I mean, he's a nice man, but he used to, there was a very informal agreement with Springfield that whenever Springfield called up for a Catholic chaplain, they would go over, and they'd been looking for a while to fill the position left by the last Catholic person. So I don't know. I really can't say, and I think he should have been more supportive. I think he should have, you
Do you
know.
think that was just personal to him, or is there a
I think it's
general
personal to him.
personal to him? Okay.
Yes.
Do you find that the leadership of the Catholic Church supports the work of Catholic chaplains in the NHS when they are faced with situations like this?
No, I don't think they do. Well, from my experience, they don't. And I mean, I think Catholic chaplaincy is not, or chaplaincy, religious chaplaincy is not given the effort and the support that it needs. It's very important. That people, it's not only people who are sick and vulnerable, it's also a question of end of life issues because I was a chaplain in the other hospital too. It's very critical. People's last week, before they're dying, are very, very critical times. Emotionally, they go through their whole life. Many people change drastically in their last week, and they need somebody there. And I don't think the church realizes this, or if they realize, they don't put enough effort into it. Maybe they don't have the people. Part of the issue is probably they don't have the people.
Right. So that you think is the main reason, or is it indifference, failure to understand, being intimidated
Well, I
by
think
the
being
law, by the
intimidated
current
is
climate, or is it just that they don't have the people?
no. You're right. On the other hand, there's been merciless attack on chaplaincy. What I've seen, the fact that cutting down the numbers, making them work as sort of hot desking, all this sort of thing, and it's been relentless. The hospital has to pay for the chaplaincy, and I think those people who don't have faith just feel that it's something to be
And
got
how
rid
does
of.
that excuse the church authorities from supporting chaplains? I mean, the one would have thought that if there was a merciless attack on the chaplains, the first port of call would have been for a bishop or the bishop responsible, or indeed the diocesan bishop, to inquire from the hospital why there has been such an attack. But that doesn't appear to be happening. Why not?
No, that's right.
Do you
That's
any
right.
idea?
Well, part of the issue in the Southwark Diocese is that a particular bishop has been put in charge of that, and he has the whole of the country. Yes, I think that's right. He is the bishop that is allocated from the Conference of Bishops. So he has basically the whole country. Whereas the incident happened within the Southwark Diocese, so it would be the Southwark bishop who would know much more about the local problems and be able to input, whereas somebody who has the whole country, so it was passed on to him, whereas he just had, he probably had other fish to fry. But I think it is important. It's very important for the local priests, but partly the number of priests, partly the attacks now that against chaplaincy. I mean,
Well, I mean, let me put it bluntly. It seems to be a major failure of leadership in the leadership of the Catholic Church that it doesn't address what you have described as a merciless attack on chaplaincies, including Catholic chaplaincies. If they do nothing about that, is that not an egregious failure of leadership?
I think that's right. You know, it's a very important area. It's a very important area. I mean, I think they would say that they don't have the men to do that. But, you know, even addressing the whole issue at a high level, saying, look, chaplaincy is being attacked, and the NHS in general has to do something about this, stop the numbers falling. And these people are very important for recovery, you know, for recovery of patients, and not only that, well, you know, they by equality, they should be there, if by nothing else. But, you know, it's a far cry. This is UK, England is a Christian country, and as always, you know, a lot of people, you know, when they get sick, one of the first things they want to do is to call on their pastor and have that support. And then even going into hospitals, the whole privacy issue has made it that you can't put, nobody can be told of the religion of the person. And if a Catholic, for example, patient goes into a hospital, the Catholic chaplain is not told, or the Anglican chaplain is not told, here is one of your patients has come in, could you come and see him? Because of privacy issues, they will only do that if the patient themselves asks to see that particular, I want to see a Catholic chaplain. They will send a message. But, you know, that's totally inadequate, because half of the patients, when they're sick, they're in no situation to be asking for themselves. You know, it should be an automatic flag.
Let me get that right. Catholic chaplains are not told who among the patients are Catholic.
No, they're not told. They're not told. No religion is told. And what the Catholic chaplain has to do, for example, is to look at the names. And, you know, if they look Irish names, they say, well, go and see Mrs. Flaherty, she you know, see if she wants. But that's the only way they can do it. Sometimes if you have a Catholic nurse who's in charge of the ward, they're a little bit better. And then they say, you know, call the Catholic priest on this. But yes, it's again, privacy has been over exaggerated, and they don't even put the religion down on the notes, because the chaplain is allowed to see the hospital notes and can look at them. But in most cases, the religion is not put, because either the patient is too sick when they come into the hospital to ask this question, or it's not asked.
Yes. What about the last sacrament, the sacrament of the sick, of anointing?
Yes.
Is that impeded in any way at the hospital?
If the person asks, or the relatives asks, they will ask to bring the Catholic chaplain or the Anglican chaplain as well for Anglican rites. But if the religion is not known and the person cannot tell, then that's definitely impeded. Part of the issue is that people go to church less now, and that, you know, they might not openly say, I am of such and such a religion.
But they may change their mind, may they not, when they're
well,
on
exactly.
the
They may change their mind, and they have to
when
be
they're very
allowed to be
sick.
open to that. That's right. That's right. And they have to be allowed to be open to that.
Would you characterize the situation, both in terms of what the hospital will allow chaplains to do and the support that the chaplains get from the church, as manifestly unsatisfactory, or is that overstating?
No, not overstating it at all. In fact, I would say it's worse than that, if anything, because there are these people, you know, in their last weeks of life, and they are going to appear before the divine judge, in short order. And this is the time they have to make peace with God. And are they given the help? And
Looking at
something
it from a
like,
secular point of view, which is what the chap at the hospital is plainly doing, isn't it part of a dignified, peaceful death that if they have religious views or might have religious views or a religious background, that a chaplain should be involved?
no, that's another issue. This end of life thing. They have end of life pathways, and sometimes they call the chaplain in when somebody's put on an end of life pathway to say, "Oh, such and so is dying." And I've been asked, I mean, not in the psychiatric hospital, but I've been asked to go and see somebody who is in quotes dying, and I was able to chat with them, and it didn't figure. But then I found later that the person was put on this end of life pathway. So it's a difficult situation.
I don't necessarily mean in terms of being put on end of life pathway. I just mean in general terms. Even from a secular point of view, would you say it was fair to say that part of a dignified, peaceful death may entail, particularly if a person has a religion or a religious background, may entail a chaplain seeing them?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think that has to be. It's almost like, yes, even if they don't have a religion, you're right. I think people should be, so and so. They should be able to have a chat with somebody, and then if they clearly say no, I'm not interested, that's fine. But they ought to be given the chance, because, as you know, when somebody's sick, they can't think for themselves a lot of the time, and you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so chaplaincy should be much more important. I mean, wherever you go now, it's like at St. George's Hospital, there's the chapel, and then next door there's the Muslim place, and then there's the other hospital, I forget its name now, but they have one single room for both, and they have one of these screens in the middle. There's one of these screens on wheels to separate the Muslims from the Christians. I mean, that's totally inadequate. Totally.
Okay.
That's at
Have you had any brush with hospital leadership before, or any disagreement of substance before this incident?
No. Do you mean Springfield?
Yes.
No, Springfield. No, I haven't. Not at all. Nothing.
And to your knowledge, has any other chaplain been, any other non-Christian chaplain been subject to similar treatment as you?
No, certainly I'm not. I think the only non-Christian one was the Muslim chaplain, and as far as I can see, they do everything they want, because they made this particularly separate washing area just for the Muslims.
Well, you mentioned that the hospital was moving towards having a spirituality advisor of a general nature instead of individual denominational chaplains. Has that idea been put to non-Christian chaplains?
For
example, has it been put to the Muslim chaplains?
I don't.
And if so, what was their reaction?
Well, I was only there for a short while, and I haven't. I wouldn't have thought that they would be in support of that. But like in
well, I mean, it's fair to say you don't really know, isn't it?
I don't know. No, I don't. I didn't ask them about that.
Okay. If you don't know, then you don't know. Did you or they, well, actually it's you, put to the hospital authorities that treating all religions as similar or the same is A, a breach of the Equality Act 2010, B, a breach of Article 9 of the European Convention, C, a breach of the UN Charter of Human Rights, and D, the imposition of a secularist view of religion, i.e., that it doesn't matter and that all religions are the same. Did you were you able to explain that to the hospital authorities at any stage?
Well, to tell you the truth, I wasn't aware of all this. That it was strongly as strongly in the law as you point out, which is very interesting. And I know I assumed that they could do what they wanted, really, in terms of as long as they kept the chaplaincy. But it seems like they can't.
If that is what's happening, that is an imposition upon patients, their families, hospital staff, and chaplains, and is thus highly discriminatory, oppressive, and offensive to all religions, not just Christianity. Were you aware of that?
Yes, and I did say in one letter, if I can pull it out, but I did say that to my response to the chief executive, that she was failing in her duty towards her patients, because it was up to her to make sure they had the chaplain of their own choice. And I never got a reply on that.
And to your knowledge, did they show any understanding of that position?
No, not
If
at
you got
all.
no reply, presumably
I
not.
got no reply, so I didn't know. But it seems such an obvious thing, particularly for somebody who's in charge of patients like that. If they've thought a little bit, they would have come up with that.
Do you feel that this kind of discrimination against Catholic and Christian chaplains and against Catholics and Christians generally was a one-off, or is this kind of discrimination increasing in the NHS, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, it's definitely increasing. It's being downplayed, and I think it's chaplaincy is being attacked on multiple fronts. One, because they don't register the religion of the patients. Two, the nurses, because of privacy, are not allowed to tell. Three, because they don't give them adequate space and they take their finances away. Four, there's been the Muslims are coming in and wanting to take part. They do take part of the finances, and the so that's watered down the Christian side of things. And it's like it's from all sides, and the hospital executives are either not aware or are actively against this, it would seem. And like I said, all the churches are being closed down, changed into other things. It's
To your knowledge, are many Catholic or Christian chaplains aware of this increasing discrimination?
I think they are aware. Most of the Catholic chaplains are not full-time, they're part-time. And most of the hospitals seem to be served by one-off visits as required from the churches, like they call up and say, so-and-so's dying, please send somebody in to do the last rites. So, that is not adequate. But I mean, like at St. George's, there was a very good chaplain, very, very attentive, and he would make rounds, and it was very good. But he was, again, they're all treated the same. All the chaplains are treated the same.
Can I just come in here, if I may? Father Patrick, I understand from Edmund you're not able to go beyond 12. Can you tell us what your availability will be?
No, I'm fine.
You are? Okay, that's okay.
I have two more questions. You said that the hospital told you that EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion, trumps religion, without realizing that they were stating a blatant contradiction.
Yes.
Because religion is part of EDI. When I think you said you told them that, what was their reaction?
The only response we got was that she said that her letter could have been worded a little better. I mean, it's the only thing she said. They never came back and said what we did was wrong. I mean, she was in close touch with her legal department. Her legal department gave whatever ground, as little ground as they possibly could. And I think they knew that there's no way we could enforce this on them to make them make that statement. But, you know, that was very sad, because these things should be, I don't know, they should be so set in stone that they should not be able to wriggle out of it.
Yeah. And finally, were you shown or did you see any written guidance about what chaplains can and cannot do?
Well, when I was accused of this, I went to the union representative, and he told me where to look it up. So I looked it up.
Okay, so you found some guidance on your own initiative.
Trust complaint procedure. I found, and I looked at the trust complaint procedure, and I immediately found that they were at fault.
So you weren't given any guidance in writing or orally by Springfield?
No. I wasn't. That letter didn't even arrive until after the complaint had done, after she'd sent the letter out. You know, it was so blatantly bad. I think it was probably because, you know, as a bank chaplain, the bank staff are treated like basic, you know, one in, one out. They don't really exist in many ways. So if a bank chaplain does something, they feel that they really have no power to get back at them. And most of them wouldn't. I mean, it was only because Christian Concern helped me to do this that I was able to take it forward. So thank God for them.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Most grateful to you for your attending today.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for your concern and interest. And if there's anything further I could answer, please let me know.
I'll hand you back to the chairman.
Thank you very much, James. I have a few more questions, Father Patrick, and there may be a few others from our commissioners. I just want to look at timelines. So the complaint was in August of 2019. Am I right in?
Yes.
Am I right in understanding that you sent your badge back? Was it January 2020? Can you just confirm?
I think it was January 2020. Yes.
Right. And I've got the information here about when the Christian Legal Centre attempted to pursue a claim against the trust, and they did so. I want to read this out just for our benefit and also for those listening in. It was a claim against the trust for harassment, religious discrimination, and victimization. When did the payout actually happen? When did they pay you the money exactly?
The payout, it wasn't until, I'd have to look that up to tell you the truth. It was only about
it was last year, is that right? Last year? Because the trial was
the year before that. It was probably 2022.
Right.
But I'd have to look it up.
If you can maybe get that information to us, because the trial, which obviously didn't take place, was set for July last year. So the payment was before that date, was it?
Last year.
Is that right?
Yes. It was just before that date. That's right. So it would either early this year or late the year before, either early 2023 or before, just the end of the year before that.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you tell us, you mentioned this concept of hot desking. How does that compare with what happened previously for a Christian chaplain? What was the setup like in contrast to what it is now?
In contrast, I mean, taking Springfield, they have a nice room, you know, windows, everybody has a desk, and they have shelves for books, and each chaplain has a different desk. So that's really how it used to be. Maybe they didn't used to be so many chaplains, but I don't have a long history in the chaplaincy. So they did, I mean, it's important to have a location like that where you can sit, chat, discuss. Then the state at St. George's, which I've been at as well, is a bit sort of one up from that. They just have a long desk and different parts of the desk are assigned to different people, but each has their own computer, but it's all in the same room. But then they have a little chapel separate and a little mosque area separate. So that's one step up where they've sort of pushed them a little bit together. But the hot desking is like the final thing. You just have a computer in the corridor and you have to, and I don't know how that would possibly work. I think I haven't worked in that situation, but it'll be really bad.
Yes. Since you left that role in early 2020, have you had contacts with Christian chaplains, with Catholic chaplains or other Christian chaplains within the chaplaincy service of the NHS?
Yes, I had actually been a part-time chaplain at St. George's I was at that time, and I also continued till last year. So I used to go and see patients over COVID as well, all that time. So yes, I've been part-time chaplain there for several years, but more part-time, like I get called in if somebody's gone off, and I do a few days and cover for the man who's there.
Can you just clarify, the Springfield Hospital, I understand, was part of St. George's? I haven't got the full title in front of
It's
me.
a different trust, though. The psychiatric trust
Right.
is St. George's, and anyway, it's a different trust to St.
So
George's Trust.
when did you begin this other chaplaincy role?
St. George's?
The one after Springfield University Hospital.
Well, I was there at the same time pretty well. I started at about I can't remember. It started about the same time after I was ordained, 2019, maybe later. But it was only it was not like a regular thing like Springfield where I go in twice a week. It was only if I got asked in, then I would cover somebody like for a week, or if they needed somebody extra for a short time, I'd go in during time of COVID. So it was 2020, 2021. And then I continued right up to 23. Sometimes they ask you to come in and anoint somebody because I lived close to that area.
And you served in that other chaplaincy role until when?
Till I left, that would be about June 2023.
And that was called St. George's Hospital?
St. George's University Hospital.
Right. What I'm trying to establish, and this is very helpful, the views that you've been expressing to us about what is going on currently in the chaplaincy service. So it's really based on your own experience in those two different hospitals. And would I be right in saying that your subsequent contacts with other chaplains informs you about what is continuing to happen within the chaplaincy service?
I haven't had a lot of contact with other chaplains. I mean, I also know the situation down in Canterbury from when I was a doctor there, the chaplaincy. But I haven't talked to a lot of people about this, but I looked up the statistics because I got interested in it. So I looked up on the internet about the numbers of chaplains, and they have been coming down. And there's a general concern if you look at the internet about chaplaincy.
Now, have you
chaplaincy?
Yes. Have you at any point, I've got just some miscellaneous questions. Have you at any point engaged in social media during this period of time that we're talking?
Sorry, you're cutting up. I couldn't hear that.
Sorry.
You cut out there briefly. I couldn't hear what you said.
Yeah, I'll repeat my question. Did you have a social media presence during this period of your role as a chaplain?
No, I don't really use the social media much, to tell you the truth. No.
And did you ever come across in either of these roles humanist chaplains? Did they ever emerge in those settings?
Not really. No, but the chaplaincy of St. George's is called the spiritual center or spirituality center, which sort of bizarre really, but I didn't, there was nobody particularly spiritual, spiritualist type, and I haven't met anybody like that, no.
No. Okay. Just have a couple of more questions. In the hospital, the Springfield University Hospital, were there ever any displays of rainbows or related material?
I'm sure there were, but I can't remember any particular one. I mean, the thing is, it's a very big campus, over several acres and a lot of different buildings. It wasn't in your face, but I'm sure there were. But if you go on the website, clearly it has a presence there.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the other commissioners? Will? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for answering all our questions and for giving testimony, Father Patrick. We do appreciate it. Thank you to all the commissioners and to Edmund Adamus, the Commission Secretary. Do you have any further thoughts before we close, Father Patrick, to add?
Well, the only thing is the support of the chaplaincy. If there's anything I can do to help or to get the chaplaincy to its rightful place, I certainly would. And I think it is very important. Like James Bogle said, it's really the heart of hospitals, and it's just being pushed out to the side.